So I've got reported coolant level low and oil pressure fault. Let's see what we've got on the dash. Coolant level low in red. Engine malfunction. Right. Absolutely chucking it down here. Oh God, what we got working and what haven't we got working here today. So we'll jump onto Jaltest now, do our auto VIN identification. Euro 6. We'll do main system scan because it'll be VIC3 and PCI. Proceed. I love this CAN topology view. So if we go into VIC3 to start with, we'll connect to this and see what faults we've got in there. We'll go to fault code reading, the engine is stopped, and we'll see what's in this ECU. So we've got liquid coolant level low, which is 10 occurrences. Someone's faffed about with this here because it says open circuit, short circuit. So if we have a look at this, let's see what Jaltest says. So if we go into fault code troubleshooting, we can then use our smart guides from Jaltest to diagnose a vehicle. So these are our 3 coolant level measurements: 270 ohms, 370 ohms and 100 ohms. Now if I remember rightly, full is 270, check coolant or amber is 370, and low in red is 100. So we'll just go to display measurements and see what it's saying. Now, I can't check it in my smart guide, so we'll go to measurements, measurement selection, and we'll check coolant level resistance here. So that's 100 ohms at the moment. So that was saying there's nothing in it. So if we go back to our fault code troubleshooting for the coolant liquid level low fault, we can add hopefully 100 ohms or select 100 ohms because we're on our low level. So if we look at general information, we're at this one here. So how do we fix this? There you go, a yellow or red warning message is activated on the instrument cluster. So let's check our coolant level. How low is low? Well, I wouldn't say it's low at all. So there's plenty of coolant in the header tank. This can mean only one other thing. We've got a resistance measurement, which means there's an electrical circuit there. This is a magnet that floats on the water up and down this tube. That tube is where your level sensor slides into the header tank. So that means that this float magnet is stuck on that tube and it needs a new header tank. On to the next fault. Let's get out of VIC and into PCI. So we're in engine protection. We've got engine oil pressure, valid data but below normal operating range, and injection rail pressure sensor, incorrect or intermittent data. So, how have we got low oil pressure? So if we go into our information about the oil pressure sensor, let's see where it's located. So we've got 4 pins, power supply and a signal voltage. Rather than run it through the smart guide, I will go to measurements and we'll do it through here because I want to see RPM on here as well for you. So we'll go oil and we'll have speed. There we go. Let's slap them up. Let's go and have a look what's going on here. So there's no oil pressure, apparently. So if we go back into our fault codes now and then go to our smart guides, I'll pull up the data for the checking data for the oil pressure sensor, because I want to know what needs to be powers, grounds and signal, because we'll get the cab over and we'll check what's going on. Just check the cab now for loose items. That won't go through the window screen, and we'll check the oil pressure switch. Let's get this cab over. So our cab's over. This is our oil pressure switch here, just on the block behind the oil filter. Just got to get that off and we can test the wiring. I got that annoyed with that oil pressure switch plug. I prototyped fitting to turn into a socket, which I can then put an extension in to undo them plugs in the future. So no more messing about with them. Anyway, back to it. Now I've got this loose, I can get the plug off. We've got 3 wires there, powers, grounds and signal. We'll test the wiring. So if we go into diagrams and just go to the normal wiring diagrams in Jaltest, from here we can put in oil, and we've got oil pressure switch, which is F810, which is this one down here. So we know pins 2, 4 and 1 are our power supply, our ground and our signal back to the ECU. Now we just need to see which ones are pins 2, 4 and 1. So if we double tap our sensor on the diagram, we're looking for pins 2, 4 and 1. That's our powers, grounds and our signal return. So if we look at the shape of the plug, and we can work out where the cutouts are compared to this. So I've got this wired as per the diagram now, and we've got 4.9 volts on the oil pressure switch, 4.8 volts. Now we can have 4.8 to 5.2 on the power supply, so I think the power supply is just fine. I think looking at the fault codes, we're going to need a new switch. The truck keeps having yellow and red oil pressure faults on the dash. It did have a consistent red oil pressure fault, which I then changed the oil pressure switch, which then gave us an actual oil pressure reading on Jaltest. So now we're actually getting oil pressure. These faults are intermittent, so we're going to have to put an oil pressure gauge in the block, which is what I've got here. It's a brilliant set, to be honest, and it comes with the right adapters. So I'm just going to get the blank out of the block, which sits above the crankcase ventilation unit, and we'll go from there. Oh, I think this is a number 8. Is it number 8? Nope, number 9. Tidy. So we'll get this screwed in this hole here. Fingers crossed I can get it in. I've managed to get this started. I'll run it in with a socket and an extension. We'll just nip this up because I'm not going crazy. There we go. That's in there. Beautiful. And then we can just click the gauge on. So I've got engine speed here, which is 0 RPM, oil pressure relative, which is 0, oil temperature, which is 9 degrees, and my gauge here, which is saying 0 bar. So I'm going to start this up now, and hopefully this gauge matches that gauge, and we can then go off the manufacturer's data to check whether the oil pressure is good or not. So let's start this up. So my gauge isn't leaking and it's showing consistent oil pressure. Let's rev it up and see what happens. So the gauge works, but it's not making any oil pressure, which says to me that we're going to need an oil pump. That's the problem, I think. Right, let's get this back in. As you can see from the pictures, the pickup pipe was blocked, hence no oil pressure. So once the pickup pipe for the oil pump was cleaned out and fresh oil was fitted to the engine, it made pretty much factory oil pressure, so the customer was happy at the end of the day. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, made it to the end, drop a like, subscribe if you're not, and I'll catch you in the next one.